6 days before he passed away, he won a race. 2 days before, to the 911 call, he sent his son a birthday message. And for 11 days, a body that had endured 22 seasons and 2 championships was subtly transmitting signals that no one in the sport could decipher in time. How could someone fail to see something that was clearly visible to everyone? What was the cough that appeared at Watkins Glen, ended up on the floor of a Concord bathroom, and was still audible in a published interview? Are you really telling us? Beyond the villain whom fans loved to jeer at, and the champion they were never quite prepared to lose, who was Kyle Busch? Before we respond to any of that, we must travel back 11 days to a road course in New York, to a radio broadcast that was heard by everyone on the show, and to the time this story subtly revealed itself to a sport that wasn't paying attention. Every story has a point at which the conclusion subtly, almost courteously, announces itself, and no one in the room can hear it. On May 10, 2026, Kyle Busch drove the number 8 Chevrolet through one of the most challenging road courses on the NASCAR schedule at Watkins Glen International. Elevation shifts that penalize the body. Most people will never encounter high-speed turns that put pressure on the sinuses and compress the spine. A physical environment that doesn't forgive weakness, that finds it, intensifies it, and turns it into a problem you cannot ignore. That week, Kyle Busch suffered from a sinus cold. It sounds insignificant. It sounds like the kind of information you bring up and then ignore. However, something changed in the last few circuits of that race as the car was pushing through the G-forces of the Glen's signature S's. The man inside the automobile, the man who had spent 22 seasons making discomfort seem insignificant, reached for his radio, but not catastrophically or overtly. The entire television audience watched what he said next in real time. After the race, he asked team physician Bill Heisel to administer an injection. Not tomorrow, not after the weekend. He finished the race when it was over. In 8th place, he took the checkered flag. After pulling into the garage, he was given whatever care the team physician had in store for him. After that, Kyle Busch moved on since this was the core of who he was. He put it under the category of challenges faced by racers. He experienced the unnamed ache that every driver at that level goes through. He took a car home. What no one in the garage, on that show, or with a microphone aimed at him that afternoon thought to ask was the question that now looms over everything. Not the question of what was wrong, but the question of what was already starting. He passed away 11 days later. After requesting a doctor over the radio, he raced 11 days later. He never again brought it up in public. The sport continued on until the following weekend, as it usually does, as it must, and as it was intended to. It was unaware that it had already seen the beginning of a tale it was not ready to read. Kyle Busch had an interview with The Athletic 5 days prior to the 911 call. It was the kind of talk that takes place in the interim between racing weekends. A temperature check, a check-in, an opportunity for an experienced driver to consider the current state of the season and his expectations for its future. Professional, routine, the kind of conversation that is published, read by fans of the sport, and then vanishes into the archive by Tuesday morning. He didn't bring up the cough as a warning or a confession. He said it in a nonchalant, almost aside-like manner, like a man would say something he has already come to terms with. The way you talk about a bruise that doesn't prevent you from moving, you can kind of still hear it, he said to the reporter, and both the reporter and the readers could. And 6 days prior at Watkins Glen, the broadcast had already demonstrated to the world that something inside that body was begging for attention. The follow-up story was not written. Why would they do that? Worse had raced with Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch had a broken leg while operating a vehicle. Kyle Busch was not one to give up. He was the type of man who used every challenge as proof. Proof that he fit in. Proof that the skeptics were mistaken. There was proof that the fast-moving, deadly version of Kyle Busch that the world had chosen to ignore was still present. A cough was nothing new. The background sounds was a cough. There was a race weekend planned for the sport. Here's what we currently know, though, standing in opposition to what transpired. On May 10th, that cough had been present at Watkins Glen. The interview on May 16th included it. When the 911 call came in on May 20th, it would be more noticeable, more demanding, and hard to ignore. It would not go away. It was developing. How does it feel to have an unidentified object in your chest? Laughing with your son at a go-kart track, racing at 200 mph, signing autographs, all while that thing keeps up its silent, disastrous work. How does it feel to be the most competitive man in every space you walk into, and to have a body engaged in a conflict that you are unaware is taking place? For 22 seasons, Kyle Busch responded to inquiries about his speed, championships, and the discrepancy between his skill and his legacy. He had never once implied that he was weak in an interview or on a radio broadcast. His vocabulary did not include that. He did not construct that. He was constructed from the ground up. To persevere, one must travel from Las Vegas to Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, and the 8th Chevrolet. So he persevered. The timing was somewhat compressed by the speed of his last weeks on May 15th, the day before that athletic interview. At Dover Motor Speedway, he got into a Spire Motorsports truck and took over. Out of 200 laps, 147 were led. In a place that had always heard his name, a pole started a winning lane that hadn't heard it in a long time. He remarked, "Love coming to do," as he crossed the finish line. "It's always been one of my favorite racetracks." The Fox Sports reporter then posed a question to him that, in hindsight, carries a burden it was never intended to. "Why do the winds never grow old?" she asked him. After pausing, he uttered something that no one at the time recognized as prophecy, but that everyone who has heard it subsequently is unable to interpret in any other way. "You never know when the last one will be." He said it casually. With the practiced comfort of a man who has been in this sport long enough to understand that certainty is an illusion, he said it the way veterans say things that are true, because there is never a certainty of reaching the finish line. "But since you don't have a contract for tomorrow, you should rejoice the victory in front of you." It was insight. Talking was an experience. It was 22 seasons of showing up when the skeptics urged him not to, as well as 69 Truck Series victories and 63 Cup victories. He was unaware that he was correct. For the 69th and last time in the Truck Series, he entered Dover's victory lane. His record, his victory, his final one. He would race in Charlotte 2 days later. Kyle Busch finished 17th in the All-Star race at Charlotte Motor Speedway, 1 day after Dover, 5 days after the athletic interview, and 17 days after Watkins Glen. There were no championship points awarded for that race. It was a spectacle. It was the type of race where veterans control the machine and the moment, not standing, and then head home with plans for the following week. He thought about the Coca-Cola 600 as he returned home. He was never able to get there. And there was something inside his chest that sounded like a cough, something he had remarked casually to a reporter who had no reason to think it was anything more. Continued to operate as it had since at least May 10th. Continued to construct, wait, and advance toward the day in 4 days when it would make its announcement in the remaining language. Not a 911 call from a restroom floor, not a statement in a published interview, not a cough, not a radio message to a team physician. In a champion's life, there are weekends that feel just like every other weekend. The preparation is the same. It's the same ritual. The helmet continues in the same manner as it has for the past 22 years. Before the visor drops, the same breath is taken in the same order. It's the same transition from human to machine operator that takes place halfway between the grid and the garage. Nothing declares itself to be definitive. For Kyle Busch, that weekend was May 17th and 18, 2026. Nothing puts its hand on your shoulder and says, "Remember this one?" On Thursday, he reached Dover Motor Speedway. The cough persisted. It's still somewhat audible. Kyle Busch had made a career out of racing with things that were still there, as he had informed The Athletic the day before. A fractured leg in 2015, the pressure of a championship season crumbling around him, and then having to start over from scratch. Pain was not an excuse to give up. Pain was a requirement of the job. He got into the truck after you handled it, filed it, and got into the automobile. Furthermore, the performance of a managerial decline did not follow. It was not the deliberate, calculated effort of someone preserving energy in the face of an unidentified sickness. It was supremacy, unmistakable, classic Kyle Busch supremacy, the kind who turned everyone else into disciples while turning his detractors into foes for 10 years. Out of 200 laps, 147 were led. He began at the pole. He was in charge of the race in the same way that a conductor is in charge of an orchestra, not by coercion, but by the sensation that every step was predetermined and that the result depended on when rather than whether. The throng that welcomed him as he got out of the Spire Motorsports number 7. There was Kyle Busch. He was, of course. Every time there was an engine, a track, and even the slightest hint of rivalry, he was there. The fact that it was go-karts didn't matter. The fact that it was an indoor facility on a Tuesday afternoon didn't matter. The presence of his son Brexton was important. At 11 years old, Brexton Kyle Busch was already racing, fast, and taking his father's name, hunger, and refusal to be ordinary from Las Vegas to every victory lane in NASCAR history. They engaged in a race. The scene was later described by witnesses who were present that afternoon with the particular compassion of those who realized what they had witnessed in retrospect. On a go-kart, Kyle Busch was laughing and racing his son in the same manner that he had raced everything in his life with complete dedication and the kind of joy that only arises when love and competition coexist at the same time. He was approached by admirers. He remained. He grinned. By all accounts, he was fully present. He uploaded something to Instagram that night. With the kind of sorrow that words were not meant to convey, he posted a family photo and wrote the words that the entire world would read 24 hours later. Brexton, happy birthday. Your mother and I are extremely pleased of the person you are becoming. Both on and off the track, you are the greatest child. Every day you astound us. There are no limits to what you can do if you keep doing what you're doing. Go over those words once more. Take your time reading them. Your mother and I are extremely pleased of the person you are becoming. On a Tuesday evening, he penned those words. By Thursday afternoon, he had passed away. That sentence has no preparation. It does not land gently because there is no framework. A parent discusses pride and opportunity in a letter to his kid, and an endless future. And it was not his son's limitless future, but his own. The future that knew it was going to end abruptly, without ceremony, without the dignity of a farewell, and without warning. That was his final statement to the world and his final public post. It had nothing to do with racing, titles, rivalries, or the 22 seasons that had elevated him to the status of one of the best drivers in history. About his son, about love, and about the unique satisfaction of seeing someone you helped grow into something extraordinary. He didn't post again. May 20, 2026, a Wednesday. The day started the way days start when nothing has yet declared itself to be disastrous. Kyle Busch traveled to the General Motors Technical Center in Concord, North Carolina, a facility designed specifically to prepare race cars and drivers for the future. A Chevrolet simulator was waiting. Work needed to be done. 4 days remained till the release of the Coca-Cola 600. 600 meters of racing on a half-mile racetrack. The NASCAR calendar's longest race, the race that distinguishes those who are ready from those who are not. Every Memorial Day weekend, Charlotte hosts a race that carries the weight of something that has always mattered and always will. He was getting ready. He was doing that at the time. He was doing out his duties. Such a facility's simulator isn't a video game. It's a full-motion racing setting, a contraption built to accurately mimic the mental and physical demands of a 200 mph race car such that the body reacts as it would on a real track. It simulates the G-forces. The neck loads are actual. There is a real cardiovascular need. It's not passive. Every time it runs, it asks the body a question. And there was nothing left in Kyle Busch's body at 5:30 p.m. on May 20th. What precisely transpired in that building in the last few minutes before to the call? What he felt, what he comprehended, what the particular sequence of sensations was that brought a 41-year-old champion to the floor of a bathroom. We don't know everything. The 911 caller's description is what we know. We are aware of what was captured on the tape that TMZ and CBS News were able to obtain from the Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office. Furthermore, the recording does not tell the tale of a man who suddenly passed out. It tells the tale of a man who knew something was wrong, sensed it coming, and managed to get to the restroom before his body gave out. The caller's voice sounded like someone trying to balance function and terror. The individual on the floor would not benefit from panic, so function was chosen. I have a patient who is experiencing shortness of breath, extreme heat, and the fear of passing out. He is also coughing up some blood and generating a little amount of blood. The cough that was heard at the athletic interview on May 16th and that had been evident at Watkins Glen on May 10th had reached its dreadful end. Not as background noise, not as an aside in a written conversation, but as blood, as a body that, after 11 days of being asked to remain silent, eventually refused. The caller reported that he was awake. He's conscious. He's conscious. 3 times, as though he could be anchored there by repetition. As though stating something enough times will make it real forever. The ambulance arrived. Kyle Busch was taken to a Charlotte hospital from the General Motors Technical Center. The man who had driven through a broken leg and who had never once in 22 seasons indicated he was frail, became comatose somewhere between the floor of that bathroom and the hospital's emergency room. The sport, which had either applauded or jeered him for 20 years, was still unaware of what had transpired. The supporters who trailed him, the competitors who had faced him, and the Richard Childress racing crew that had constructed a vehicle for Sunday's 600-meter race. So yet none of them were aware. The world remained as it had been on Tuesday. The universe in which Kyle Busch wrote birthday greetings about boundless horizons and went go-kart racing with his son. It was already the end of that world. It had just not yet made the announcement. Being the last person to realize that everything has changed, what does it mean? How does Samantha Busch feel on the evening of May 20th? To get a call? To take a car to a Charlotte hospital? There are no words to describe entering a room where the man who wrote, "Your mom and I are so proud of you just 24 hours ago," is no longer the man who walked into a simulator facility that morning. When asked to carry something, there are no words that don't fail. Statements would be made tomorrow. Richard Childress Racing, NASCAR, and the Busch family would all make a combined announcement tomorrow. The sport would cease in a manner not seen since February 2001, when a black number 3 crashed into the wall at Daytona and did not emerge unharmed. Tomorrow would bring the inquiries and the tributes. However, it was for tomorrow. Additionally, there were 23 hours and 10 minutes of the particular, dreadful silence that precedes the news that the world is not prepared to receive between the ambulance that left Concord at 5:30 and the word that arrived at 5:40 the following afternoon. 23 hours spent in a Charlotte hospital with a sport that was still getting ready for Sunday and a family who had uploaded a birthday photo the previous evening. There is a specific type of waiting that the English language does not have a term for. It's not optimism. Hope has a purpose. Hope leans forward, reaches for something, and has the potential to arrive. It's also not grief. Grief is aware. The news has already been received by grief, who has started the arduous process of learning to bear it. Between those two things, this waiting exists. In the room where a family sits inside information that will soon belong to everyone, but for these final hours exclusively belongs to them. The phone has already rung, but the words have not yet been said aloud to the world. The morning of May 21st, 2026, existed there, in that room, in that quiet. Kyle Busch was in a Charlotte hospital. He had not responded when he came. The machines were measuring, recording, and insisting on the biology of a situation that had beyond biology and was beyond the capabilities of the instruments. There was his family. Samantha was present. The children, including Brexton, whose father had written, "There is no limit to what you'll accomplish less than 36 hours ago," were in that awful geography between knowing and not knowing that adults create around children when the news is too big for them to handle. Brexton's birthday post was still active on Instagram. The world went on as usual outside the hospital. The distance to Charlotte Motor Speedway was 45 minutes. The teams were getting ready for the racing events that will take place this week. Mechanics were working on the number 8 Chevrolet that Kyle Busch was scheduled to drive on Sunday. Men who had no idea they were getting an automobile ready for a driver who would never ride in it again. His name was still on the Coca-Cola 600 entry list. The sport was based on the presumption that he would be present. Because bodies rely on oxygen to function, they are unaware of its absence until it is gone. The Busch family issued a statement at 10:23 a.m. It was the kind of statement that is written in the particular language of people who are juggling an impossible position between what they know and what they are not yet ready to say. It was meticulous and measured. Kyle was admitted to the hospital due to a serious sickness. He will not participate in any of his planned events this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway since he is presently receiving treatment. Hospitalization and severe illness won't compete. It makes sense for the NASCAR community to interpret those words as saying, he is sick. He will miss a race. We will know more soon. The language allowed for that. Drivers become ill. Drivers are absent from races. Drivers come back. However, there was something in those words, something in the specific compression of... However, this is what the record reveals. As of May 22, 2026, no primary, reliable source had verified the theory. After reviewing the allegation, the fact-checking group Snopes discovered no official medical confirmation to back it up. The cause of death had not been discussed by the Busch family. The hospital had remained silent. NASCAR has remained silent. Richard Childress Racing remained silent. It's not always true what circulates. It's not usually what has been confirmed that travels the fastest. Furthermore, the discipline of accuracy requires us to maintain the distinction between what is confirmed and what is conjecture in the narrative of Kyle Busch's last days. This is documented even in cases where conjecture is more satisfying than the quiet of the unverified. A man has been coughing for at least 11 days. After a race, the man sought medical assistance, but he continued to race. On a Wednesday afternoon, a man's body within a simulator facility reached a point where there was no turning back. What this means is that the complete medical picture of what transpired within Kyle Busch between May 10th and May 21 might not be fully revealed for some time. Furthermore, the family residing inside that unresolved question is far more deserving of accuracy's protection than the world is of a neat explanation. The announcement was made at 5:40 p.m. 3 voices, not just one. The Busch family, NASCAR, Richard Childress Racing. A communal statement, the kind that is put together in the particular, meticulous language of collective mourning, where each word is carefully considered since it will be cited, repeated, and carried forward into a history that was not intended to be written in this manner. The news was accepted by the sport that had either cheered him on or booed him for 20 years, turned him into a villain, and then, quietly and without fanfare, transformed him into something more akin to a legend. This is how sports communities reacted to news that defied their preconceived notions. They came to a halt. They pivoted in its direction. They gazed at the hole where he had stood. At 5:40 p.m., the announcement was made. 3 voices, not just one. Richard Childress Racing, NASCAR, and the Busch family. Because the weight of what they were saying required every shoulder to bear it, the 3 voices spoke as one. There was no more Kyle Busch. The sport came to an end in a manner not seen since February 2001. Since a black number 3 entered the wall at Daytona and did not emerge unscathed. It put an end to the way. Communities come to a standstill when they lose someone who is so essential to their identity that his departure completely alters the landscape of what they thought was permanent. Absolutely cannot comprehend this news. No performance, no oratory, just a man standing in front of something too large to process, stated Denny Hamlin in 6 words. I'm kinda lost for words at this moment, wrote Jimmy Johnson. But you will be missed, my friend. The Coca-Cola 600 would go on. It always goes on. That is both the brutality and the grace of this sport. President Trump described him as a true talent who loved NASCAR and its fans. He was gone too soon, to put it mildly. The calendar does not stop for grief. But the number 8 Chevrolet that was being prepared for 600 meters on Sunday, the car built for a driver who collapsed in a simulator 4 days before the race will carry his name forward in the only way racing knows how to carry its lost. 234 victories across 3 national series, 2 Cup championships, 69 Truck Series wins, a record that belongs to him alone, the winningest driver of his generation. A man who arrived at 19 years old and spent 22 seasons proving every single doubter catastrophically wrong. He raced 11 days after asking for a doctor on the radio. He won his last race 6 days before he died. He posted a birthday message to his son 2 days before the 911 call, and nobody saw it coming. There is a photograph from Tuesday, May 19th, a father and a son at a go-kart track in Durham laughing. In that photograph, Kyle Busch does not know yet. He is simply a man who has spent 22 years at 200 mph, spending his Tuesday at 11 MP with his boy, competing even when nothing was at stake. He meant it for Brexton. But we hear it now as the final judgment of a man who spent 41 years racing without a ceiling and handed that refusal of limits forward like a trophy. He didn't get to finish. He should have had more miles, more seasons, more Sunday afternoons. He deserved more Sundays. If you ever watched Kyle Busch race, if you were in the stands when that number 8 came through, please let us know in the comments. Did you applaud him or did you see one of his victories in person? Kyle Busch, Las Vegas, Charlotte, Dover, 2 championships, 234 victories, 41 years. Tell us something else. Where in the world are you watching this video from right now? Leave your city in the comments. Let's see how far his story has traveled. Subscribe, because we will continue to tell the stories that deserve to be told with the honesty and weight they require. No one will ever see the same number on a Chevrolet again.